In the annals of military history, there are tales of audacious courage, of ingenuity birthed from desperation, and of individuals who, against all odds, redefine the very parameters of warfare. But few stories ignite the imagination quite like that of a mild-mannered high school history teacher from Illinois, who strapped a handful of infantry weapons to a fragile, fabric-covered civilian airplane and dared to take on the might of the German Panzer divisions. This isn't just a story of daring. It's a testament to the power of human spirit, the unexpected origins of innovation, and how one man, dismissed by his enemies as mad, permanently altered the battlefield. Imagine for a moment. It's the twilight of summer, September 20th, 1944. The place is Aurore, France. The air is still, thick with the damp embrace of a lingering morning fog that has stubbornly clung to the landscape, grounding every aircraft with purpose and power. The clock ticks past noon, 12:47 p.m. to be exact, and then a subtle shift, a whisper of wind, and the ethereal veil begins to lift, teasing the world below with glimpses of what lies hidden. Up above, in the cramped cockpit of what most people would consider little more than a glorified kite, sits Major Charles Carpenter. His gaze, honed by countless hours of observation, cuts through the dissipating mist. And then he sees them, a sight that would send shivers down the spine of any Allied soldier, a formidable formation of German armor, a steel tide, inexorably rolling across the open fields. Their objective? The American positions below. Their purpose? To halt the relentless Allied advance, to stem the tide of history that was turning against the Third Reich. For any other pilot, in any other plane, the sight of those behemoths would signal a retreat, a frantic call for heavier air support. But Charles Carpenter wasn't just any pilot, and his Piper L4 Grasshopper, despite its unassuming appearance, was no longer just an observation plane. His hands, though calm, tightened on the control stick. He was about to attempt something utterly unprecedented, an act of sheer audacity that defied every military manual and every conventional understanding of aerial combat. Just days earlier, a correspondent from Stars and Stripes had captured the essence of the man. Carpenter had famously declared, "Some people around here think I'm nuts, but I just believe that if we're going to fight a war, we have to get on with it 60 minutes, an hour, and 24 hours a day." These weren't just words. They were a creed, a philosophy of relentless engagement that would come to define the legend of Bazooka Charlie. And this was the man who had looked at an unarmed, fragile observation plane and seen not its limitations, but its potential, transforming it into one of the most unlikely and devastating tank destroyers in the annals of military aviation. The sheer improbability of his endeavor is almost comedic, if not for the deadly seriousness of its intent. Carpenter, a former high school history teacher from Illinois, had personally overseen the modification of his L4. Picture this: 6 bazookas, formidable anti-tank weapons typically carried by infantry soldiers, crudely but effectively mounted on the wing struts of his delicate aircraft. The contrast was stark, almost absurd. On one side, the Germans, with their awe-inspiring 45-ton Panther tanks and the monstrous 57-ton Tigers, representing the pinnacle of their wartime engineering prowess. On the other, a fabric-covered plane, weighing a mere 1,220 pounds, less than the engine of a single Tiger, flown by a pilot who the Germans would, in a mixture of fear and grudging respect, christen the Mad Major. The very mathematics of this impending engagement seemed to mock all logic. Carpenter's L4 was powered by a modest 65-horsepower Continental engine, an output so low it generated less power than the cooling fan of a Tiger tank. Its top speed, a leisurely 85 miles per hour, was slower than a panther could even traverse its turret. And its skin? A thin, almost transparent cotton fabric so vulnerable that a mere pistol round could tear right through it. Yet, by the fading light of that September day, an unthinkable reality would unfold. 2 Panther tanks, once symbols of German might, would lie smoking wrecks in the French countryside, their crews likely still grappling with the incomprehensible truth that they had been vanquished not by a fighter bomber, not by another tank, but by what looked disturbingly like a civilian training plane. The Battle of Araur was no minor skirmish. It represented Germany's last significant armored counteroffensive in Lorraine. General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army had mustered a staggering force, 262 tanks and assault guns, including the elite 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, augmented by the veteran 11th Panzer Division. Their ranks boasted 107 Panthers and 75 Panzer IV-4s, backed by 80 assault guns, a truly formidable array, meticulously assembled to crush Patton's relentless advance towards the German heartland. The sheer scale of this force underscores the audacity of Carpenter's actions. He was not engaging a patrol. He was striking at the spearhead of a desperate, strategic offensive. Within this attacking juggernaut was the 113th Panzer Brigade, a unit hastily formed, perhaps, but undeniably equipped with some of Germany's most technologically advanced armor. The Panther tanks that rumbled across the French soil that morning were engineering marvels. Each one sported a high-velocity 75mm gun, a weapon capable of obliterating any Allied tank from ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Their frontal armor, an imposing 80mm thick and sloped at an optimal 55 degrees, was designed to deflect almost every Allied anti-tank weapon. They were fortresses on treads designed to dominate the land battlefield. But even the most brilliant engineering can harbor a critical, unforeseen flaw. These magnificent machines possessed a fatal vulnerability that their designers had, in their focus on ground-level threats, never truly considered. The roof armor, the thin shell protecting the crew from above, measured a mere 16 to 25 millimeters thick on Panthers, and a slightly better but still inadequate 25 millimeters on Tigers. German engineers, logically, had prioritized protection against horizontal threats, never for a moment conceiving that their greatest danger might descend from the sky, and certainly not from an observation plane armed with what were essentially glorified shoulder-fired rockets. German military doctrine regarding observation aircraft, like the L-4 Grasshopper, had been consistently dismissive throughout the war. They were seen as harmless spotters, buzzing annoyances best ignored. The prevailing wisdom was simple. Shooting at them would only betray German positions, drawing devastating artillery fire, a poor tactical exchange. This strategic calculation, a deeply ingrained tenet of German ground warfare, was about to be obliterated by one man and his flying contraption. Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, commanding the 58th Panzer Corps, would later grimly assess these new panzer brigades as possessing slight combat value due to their incomplete training and equipment. They lacked crucial reconnaissance capabilities, effectively forcing them to advance blindly into the American lines. They were about to encounter something their training had never, in their wildest dreams, prepared them for. Let's pause and consider the man himself, Charles M. Carpenter. Born on August 29, 1912, in rural Illinois, his formative years were shaped by hardship. His farming family lost everything in the brutal grip of the Great Depression, and the subsequent divorce of his parents meant young Charles and his siblings often toiled on neighbors' farms, scraping by to make ends meet. Yet, even amidst such adversity, his intellect shone through. He excelled academically, earning scholarships that took him from the Roosevelt Military Academy in Aledo, Illinois, to Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Before the war intervened, he shaped young minds as a history teacher at Moline High School, where he also found love, marrying Elna Frattel in 1940. They had a daughter, Carol, but the looming shadow of war would soon demand his attention. When America was plunged into the conflict in 1942, the 30-year-old teacher, leaving behind the relative safety of the classroom, enlisted. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant and rapidly completed flight training. By 1944, having earned the rank of major, he was assigned to the 1st Bombardment Division in France, before being transferred to fly critical artillery support missions for none other than General George S. Patton's 4th Armored Division. His primary duty involved flying reconnaissance and artillery spotting in his L-4H Grasshopper, the military designation for the ubiquitous Piper J-3 Cub. But more importantly, he also served as the personal pilot for General John S. Wood, the 4th Armored Division commander. This connection, this direct link to the highest command, granted him an unusual degree of autonomy and the freedom to pursue his unconventional, often revolutionary, initiatives. His aircraft, serial number 4330426, would soon shed its anonymous designation and acquire a legendary name, a clever play on the famous wartime icon Rosie the Riveter. It became Rosie the Rocketer. In August of 1944, Carpenter penned a letter home to Elna, a window into the dangers he was facing and his almost casual acceptance of them. "Lately, I have been taking quite a few chances," he wrote, "but my luck has been marvelous. Yesterday, I got a bullet hole through the wing and hit a church steeple with one wheel. It was very little for what might have happened under the circumstances." This brief, almost understated account speaks volumes about the constant peril, the razor-thin margins of survival, and his unflappable demeanor. His philosophy of warfare was refreshingly, frighteningly simple and direct. As he articulated to Associated Press correspondent Wes Gallagher, "My idea of fighting a war is to attack, attack, and then attack again." It was a philosophy born of urgency, a belief that passive observation was insufficient, that true victory lay in relentless offensive action. Carpenter wasn't, in fairness, the very first to conceive of arming an L-4. Lieutenants Harley Merrick and Roy Carson had earlier dabbled in mounting bazookas on their observation planes, achieving some success by destroying 2 German trucks. But Carpenter, with his relentless drive and meticulous approach, would perfect the technique, elevating it to an unprecedented level of effectiveness and tactical impact. His modifications began modestly, with 2 M1A1 bazookas affixed to the wing struts. Working closely with resourceful ordnance technicians, Carpenter engineered a robust mounting system. This involved plywood backing plates, strategically designed to distribute the considerable weight and powerful recoil forces across the L-4's inherently fragile wing structure. Electrical wiring snaked from the launch tubes, leading to a series of toggle switches in the cockpit, giving him the critical ability to fire the rockets individually or in devastating salvos. Initial tests, as is often the case with groundbreaking innovation, revealed some critical limitations. The M1A1 bazookas, with their 2.36-inch diameter rockets, could penetrate approximately 3 inches of armor. This was adequate for light vehicles, perhaps, but alarmingly marginal against the thick hide of a German tank. Unfazed, Carpenter immediately pushed for an upgrade. He acquired 6 M9 bazookas, firing the significantly improved M6A3 high-explosive anti-tank heat rockets. These advanced projectiles could penetrate a formidable 3.9 inches of armor at a 30-degree impact angle, more than enough to defeat the Achilles heel of any German tank, its thin top armor. The complete modification, while revolutionary, exacted a heavy toll on the aircraft. It added approximately 106 pounds to an L4 already operating near its maximum weight capacity. With a gross weight limit of 1,220 pounds, and the pilot, fuel, and basic equipment already consuming the lion's share of that allowance, Carpenter was forced to fly alone. The observer's position, typically occupied by an artillery spotter, remained empty, a silent testament to the extreme measures required. There simply wasn't enough lift capacity for another person. The aerodynamic impact was significant and immediate. The bazookas, protruding from the wings, created substantial drag, further reducing the L4's already modest top speed and making the aircraft even more sluggish and cumbersome in turns. The once graceful plane, designed for gentle observation flights, now carried the devastating firepower of half a dozen infantry anti-tank teams, fundamentally altering its character and purpose. The technical challenge of actually hitting a moving tank from an L4 seemed, on paper, utterly insurmountable. The aircraft possessed no gun sight, no sophisticated aiming system whatsoever beyond the pilot's raw, intuitive eye. The bazookas were rigidly fixed to fire straight ahead, meaning Carpenter had to point the entire aircraft, a lumbering, slow-moving target itself, directly at his quarry. The M6A3 rockets had an effective range of roughly 300 yards, but their accuracy plummeted dramatically beyond a mere 100 yards. This wasn't precision-guided munitions. This was point and shoot, with all the inherent imprecision that implied. To achieve any hope of a hit, Carpenter meticulously developed a specific attack profile that would quickly become his signature technique, a daring ballet of aerodynamics and raw courage. He would begin his approach from an altitude of about 1,500 feet, spotting his target below. Then, he would initiate a chaotic corkscrew descent, a deliberate maneuver designed to utterly confuse anti-aircraft gunners on the ground. This spiral approach made it incredibly difficult for ground forces to predict his flight path, to get a bead on him, or to establish an effective lead for their weapons. At approximately 300 feet, just above the reach of most small arms fire, he would briefly level out, align his aircraft with the unsuspecting target, and then, with a surge of adrenaline, push into a steep, almost suicidal dive. The final approach was an act demanding nerves of steel, a moment of utter vulnerability. At a mere 100 yards, barely 300 feet from the behemoth below, Carpenter would toggle his firing switches, unleashing a salvo of rockets streaking towards the enemy armor. Immediately after firing, with the roar and flash of the rockets still echoing, he would pull up sharply, pushing every ounce of the L4's limited power to claw his way skyward, escaping the inevitable, ferocious return fire. The entire attack sequence, from the initiation of the dive to the frantic climb away, transpired in less than 30 agonizing seconds. But those were 30 seconds of maximum exposure, maximum vulnerability, a temporal sliver where life and death hung precariously in the balance. The L4's Continental I-65 engine, designed for leisurely observation, audibly struggled with the additional weight and aerodynamic drag of the rocket installation. The plane's normal climb rate of 450 feet per minute, already modest, plummeted to a barely perceptible 200 feet per minute when fully loaded with rockets. Every single foot of altitude gained was precious, buying another second away from the effective range of small arms. Another fleeting moment to plan the next impossible attack. This wasn't elegant dogfighting. It was a gritty, brutal, close-quarters slugfest against an enemy that dwarfed him in every measurable way. The morning of September 20th, 1944, as we established, began shrouded in a thick, immobilizing fog. Combat Command A, under the leadership of Colonel Bruce C. Clark, held critical positions near Araur, bracing for an attack after intelligence reports indicated a significant German armor buildup. Carpenter, driven by his unwavering philosophy of continuous engagement, took off despite the oppressive weather, trusting, perhaps even willing, the conditions to improve. When the fog finally relinquished its grip around noon, Carpenter was already airborne, a lone wolf patiently searching for his prey. Below him, elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade, a company of Panther tanks in imposing formation, advanced across the open ground, directly towards American lines. The German crews, meticulously trained to scan the horizon for enemy tanks and anti-tank guns, never once considered the small, buzzing observation plane circling above as a genuine threat. This ingrained underestimation was their gravest mistake. Carpenter initiated his attack run, a dance of death he had rehearsed countless times in his mind, entering the characteristic corkscrew descent that had become his chilling trademark. The dive was steep, the fragile aircraft shuddering and protesting as speed rapidly built up. At precisely 100 yards, a distance that closed in the blink of an eye, he fired. 6 rockets streaked, fiery darts towards the lead Panther. They struck the thin roof armor, a vulnerability so strategically crucial, penetrating into the crew compartment. The massive tank lurched violently, its metallic screams silenced, grinding to a halt, thick black smoke already billowing from its hatches. Banking hard left, Carpenter clawed for altitude as a furious torrent of machine gun fire erupted from the German column below. He could hear the distinct, terrifying sound of bullets punching through the fabric skin of his aircraft, a visceral reminder of the peril as he struggled to gain precious feet. But his mission wasn't over. Within a mere 30 minutes, an astonishing display of logistical efficiency and personal resilience, he had landed, reloaded, and was airborne again, his spirit undimmed. His second sortie found the German tanks in disarray, attempting to reorganize. They had instinctively spread out, making themselves harder targets, but in doing so they had also fatally disrupted their own coordinated advance. Carpenter selected another Panther, isolating it, and dove again. This time, however, the Germans were prepared. Small arms fire, a veritable curtain of lead, filled the air around his aircraft. The distinctive chilling sound of bullets tearing through fabric was his constant companion throughout the dive. Yet, his aim remained true. Another Panther was knocked out, its turret crew tragically killed by the blast that penetrated the flimsy 16mm roof armor. By his third sortie that harrowing afternoon, Carpenter observed the surviving German tanks beginning a desperate reversal, their offensive utterly shattered, their advance completely disrupted. By the end of that incredible day, he had expended a total of 16 rockets. 2 Panther tanks were unequivocally confirmed destroyed. The German advance was decisively halted, and the legend of Bazooka Charlie, the history teacher who took on the Panzers, was irrevocably born. The 4th Armored Division's official history would specifically highlight his extraordinary role in stemming and ultimately stopping that critical German counterattack. Before Carpenter's audacious attacks, German military doctrine, as we've discussed, treated observation aircraft as little more than minor annoyances. The standard operating procedure was to ignore them unless they posed an immediate, direct threat. Engaging them, the reasoning went, would only reveal their own positions and invite devastating artillery strikes, a tactically unsound exchange. This ingrained calculation, however, underwent a seismic shift after news of the rocket-armed L-4s began to propagate through the ranks. German units soon began receiving urgent bulletins, stark warnings about American observation planes that were now carrying anti-tank weapons. What had been dismissed as harmless spotters were now recognized as potential tank killers, demanding immediate, aggressive engagement. Carpenter himself immediately perceived this dramatic shift. He told a Stars and Stripes reporter with a hint of grim satisfaction. "Every time I show up now, they shoot with everything they have. They never used to bother cubs. Bazookas must be bothering them a bit." This understated observation belied a profound change in the operational landscape. The impact on German operations transcended the mere physical destruction of tanks. Tank commanders, once relatively secure from aerial threats in poor weather, now had to maintain a constant, anxious vigil on the skies for even the slowest moving aircraft. Formations, which relied on tight coordination, were forced to spread out whenever L4s appeared, effectively disrupting their momentum and cohesion. Anti-aircraft weapons, previously dedicated to defending against faster, more powerful fighter bombers, now had to be redirected to engage these slow, low-flying observation planes. Infantry units were issued new, urgent orders: engage any L4 with rifles and machine pistols, creating a desperate, swirling curtain of fire that rendered low-altitude operations increasingly hazardous. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which had commenced the Battle of Araur with a formidable 90 tanks, would see its operational strength dwindle to a mere 27 within a single week. While not all these staggering losses can be directly attributed to Carpenter's actions, his persistent, terrifying attacks undoubtedly contributed significantly to the pervasive psychological pressure that eroded German combat effectiveness. Tank crews who had previously felt a degree of safety from air attack in inclement weather now faced an unpredictable, ever-present threat that could materialize at any moment, from any direction. October 1944 witnessed Carpenter further refine his audacious tactics and significantly enhance his overall effectiveness. By now, his exploits had made him famous, a legend within the Third Army. This celebrity status afforded him even greater freedom to hunt targets of opportunity. In that single month alone, he was officially credited with destroying an additional 4 tanks and an armored truck, bringing his impressive official total to 6 tanks destroyed, a tally that included 2 formidable Tiger WW2 heavy tanks. This achievement alone cemented his place in military aviation lore. On October 4th, Carpenter engaged a column of German armor that was attempting a counterattack near Château Salins. Diving through a maelstrom of intense small arms fire, he skillfully destroyed a Panzer IV with a direct hit to its engine deck. The burning tank, a fiery inferno, effectively blocked a narrow road, trapping the vehicles behind it and rendering them vulnerable, easy targets for waiting American tank destroyers. A week later, near Moncourt Woods, Carpenter spotted a terrifying sight. Tiger tanks, the most feared machines in the German arsenal, with their devastating 88 guns and impenetrable heavy armor, supporting a German infantry attack. Each weighed a staggering 57 tons and boasted frontal hull armor up to 100 mm thick. But Carpenter knew their secret. Their roof armor was still only 25 mm, still fatally vulnerable to his specialized rockets. His subsequent attack on these Tigers demanded a level of courage that bordered on the suicidal. These apex predators of the battlefield were typically enveloped by accompanying infantry and light anti-aircraft guns, specifically deployed to guard against aerial threats. Carpenter, undeterred, dove directly through a terrifying curtain of tracer fire, releasing his rockets at what can only be described as minimum range, pulling up sharply just as devastating explosions erupted behind him. One Tiger was definitively confirmed destroyed, its ammunition detonating in a spectacular, earth-shattering explosion that signaled its final, fiery demise. The impact, however, extended far beyond mere physical destruction. German tank crews, already strained by the overwhelming American material superiority, now faced a psychological threat from an utterly unexpected direction. They could no longer seek refuge by parking under dense trees for concealment. The L-4s, with their low and slow reconnaissance capabilities, could spot them regardless. They couldn't ignore the faint drone of small aircraft engines. Any one of them might be armed, might be carrying the Mad Major himself. Each mission Carpenter flew pushed the boundaries of both physics and probability. The L-4 was never, ever designed for combat. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing, meaning a single tracer round could transform the delicate aircraft into a catastrophic fireball. The pilot sat exposed, surrounded by nothing more substantial than steel tubing and fabric, utterly vulnerable to enemy fire. In his letters home, meticulously censored to spare his wife undue worry, Carpenter often hinted at the pervasive dangers. After one particularly intense mission, he wrote with characteristic understatement, "Had some excitement today. The plane has a few more holes, but still flies fine." What he omitted, for Elna's peace of mind, was that those holes represented near misses that could have severed critical control cables, punctured fuel lines, or, terrifyingly, struck the pilot himself. The dedicated ground crews who serviced Rosie the Rocketer began to keep informal tallies of the damage. After particularly intense missions, they would painstakingly count dozens of bullet holes, requiring countless patches. The crew chief reportedly told other pilots that Carpenter's plane often looked like Swiss cheese after one engagement. Yet, somehow, both pilot and aircraft continued to fly, a testament to resilience and perhaps a touch of divine intervention. The psychological pressure on Carpenter was immense, a burden few combatants ever had to bear. Unlike bomber crews who operated at relatively safe altitudes of 20,000 feet, somewhat removed from the immediate, visceral violence of combat, Carpenter engaged at point-blank range. He could see the individual German soldiers firing at him, could even discern the expressions on the tank commanders' faces as the horrifying realization dawned upon them. The combat was intensely personal, immediate, and terrifyingly intimate. Wes Gallagher, the Associated Press correspondent who interviewed Carpenter multiple times, eloquently captured his essence in Liberty magazine, describing the Major as a legend in an outfit where reckless bravery is commonplace. But Gallagher, a keen observer, also noted something else: a deep weariness in Carpenter's eyes, the unmistakable look of a man who had pushed his luck repeatedly, defied the odds time and again, and understood the terrifying statistical probabilities stacked against him. The bazooka installation on Carpenter's L-4 was not a static design. It underwent constant refinement, a testament to iterative design born of brutal combat experience. The original mounting system, using simple metal brackets, proved inadequate. The sheer recoil forces would gradually work them loose. The plywood backing plates, a clever field modification, distributed the forces more effectively, but they added crucial weight to an aircraft already operating beyond its design limits. The electrical firing system presented its own unique set of challenges. The intricate wiring had to be carefully routed through the wings and into the cockpit, meticulously protected from both the elements and the constant threat of enemy fire. Toggle switches were mounted on a simple panel, intuitively placed within easy reach of the pilot's right hand. Each switch controlled a single rocket, providing the flexibility for single shots or devastating volleys. The entire system had to be rugged enough to function flawlessly after hours of bone-jarring vibration and extreme aerial maneuvers, yet simple enough to be repaired quickly with basic field tools. Aiming, that most critical aspect of any weapon system, remained entirely visual and intuitive for Carpenter. He developed his own highly personal system of reference points, utilizing the engine cowling, the cockpit framework, and even existing scratches on the windscreen as aiming guides. He meticulously calculated lead angles based on his approach speed and dive angle, expertly compensating for wind drift and the rocket's unpredictable trajectory. There was no backup system, no second chance. If he missed, he had to endure the hail of ground fire, climb away, and attempt the terrifying maneuver again. The rockets themselves, the M6A3 heat rounds, presented their own unique set of challenges. They were fundamentally designed for ground combat, fired from a soldier's shoulder at relatively stationary targets. Fired from a moving aircraft, especially one as dynamically unstable as a bazooka-laden L4, their accuracy decreased significantly. The rocket motor burned for only 0.3 seconds, reaching maximum velocity quickly, but then the projectile would coast, unguided, to its target. Wind, the aircraft's motion, and the rocket's inherent inaccuracy meant that even what felt like a perfect aim didn't guarantee a hit. Success was a confluence of skill, daring, and sheer luck. The Battle of Aurore, where Carpenter etched his most famous success into history, represented more than just a tactical engagement. It was, in fact, the largest tank battle on the Western Front at that point. A brutal clash where American forces ultimately decimated 200 German tanks and assault guns, suffering comparatively light losses of only 25 of their own. The ambitious German plan called for the 5th Panzer Army to punch through American lines, recapture Nancy, and critically threaten Patton's entire advance. The attacking force, as we've noted, included some of Germany's best remaining armored units, albeit many were under strength and hastily reorganized after the catastrophic defeats in Normandy. The 4th Armored Division, Carpenter's unit, bore the brunt of this ferocious German assault. Outnumbered significantly, they relied heavily on superior tactics, more efficient logistics, and truly innovative solutions, like Carpenter's audacious tank-hunting L4. The division's tank destroyers, artillery, and armor worked in seamless coordination, with Carpenter providing critical reconnaissance and an unprecedented direct attack capability. His actions on September 20th were therefore not just courageous, they were strategically pivotal. They came at a truly crucial moment. The German advance had achieved initial surprise, and several American positions were in grave danger of being overrun. By decisively disrupting that Panther Company's attack, Carpenter bought invaluable time, allowing American forces to reorganize, bring up reinforcements, and solidify their defenses. His attack wasn't merely tactically successful. It had profound operational implications for the entire battle, creating a ripple effect that resonated throughout the German ranks. The psychological impact was immense. Tank crews who had felt a measure of safety from air attack, American fighter bombers rarely operated in poor weather or at low altitude, now had to contend with a terrifying new threat. Even the smallest observation aircraft, the constant, gnawing need to scan for L4s and to disperse their formations whenever one appeared critically slowed German operations and shattered their coordination. By November 1944, Carpenter had transcended regional fame to become a genuine celebrity within the Third Army. Stars and Stripes ran multiple articles chronicling the exploits of Bazooka Charlie. Popular Science featured him prominently in their February 1945 issue, hailing him as "What's New in Aviation, Piper Cub Tank Buster." Liberty Magazine, the New York Sun, and other prominent publications picked up his incredible story, catapulting him into the public consciousness as one of the most famous and unconventional pilots of the European theater. But fame, particularly in wartime, often came with an increased, perilous spotlight. German units, now keenly aware of the threat, were specifically warned about rocket-armed Cubs. Anti-aircraft defenses were beefed up, with light guns and additional machine guns specifically deployed to counter the L4 threat. Every mission for Carpenter became exponentially more hazardous as German gunners gained grim experience in engaging slow-moving aircraft at low altitude. Carpenter's own comments to reporters offered a window into his fatalistic yet resolute attitude. "Some people around here think I'm nuts," he reiterated, "but I just believe that if we're going to fight a war, we have to get on with it 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day." When confronted with the explicit dangers, he would simply shrug, "My luck has been marvelous." That luck, however, was tested repeatedly, often to its breaking point. Beyond the aforementioned church steeple incident in his letter home, there were other terrifying close calls. Machine gun fire once savagely severed one of his elevator control cables, leaving him with only minimal pitch control for the desperate flight back to friendly territory. Another time, an anti-aircraft shell exploded close enough to pepper his fragile aircraft with shrapnel, miraculously missing both the pilot and critical control systems. His crew chief, whose name, regrettably, has been lost to history, reportedly pleaded with Carpenter to desist from these suicidal rocket attacks. The ground crew had witnessed too many L-4s return, riddled with holes, or more chillingly, not return at all. But Carpenter pressed on, driven by a powerful confluence of duty and a fierce determination that his fellow pilots found both profoundly inspiring and deeply concerning. Carpenter's exceptional courage wasn't confined solely to aerial combat. On at least one well-documented occasion, he landed his L-4 near a raging battlefield in the thick of combat. He grabbed a discarded M1 rifle, a standard infantry weapon, and actively participated in ground combat. After effectively destroying a German column with his bazookas from the air, he landed his plane on a nearby road and proceeded to take 6 German soldiers prisoner, marching them back to American lines at gunpoint. Another incident further illuminates his multifaceted bravery. Carpenter landed near a disabled American Sherman tank that was under heavy German fire. Without hesitation, he climbed onto the exposed tank and manned its .50 caliber machine gun, actively helping to drive off a relentless German infantry assault while the tank crew feverishly conducted emergency repairs. His actions that day earned him particular recognition and heartfelt gratitude from the tank crew, who openly credited him with saving their lives. These extraordinary ground combat episodes earned him recognition far beyond his aerial achievements. General Patton himself, a man notoriously stingy with praise, personally presented Carpenter with the Silver Star, reportedly declaring, "This was the kind of fighting man he wanted in his army." Carpenter would also receive the Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster and the Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, testament to his valor both in the air and on the ground. These incidents revealed something profoundly important about Carpenter's character. He wasn't content to be merely an observer, or even just a flying tank destroyer. He yearned to be in the thick of the fight, wherever it was happening, utilizing whatever weapons were at hand. This attitude, while undeniably admirable, also hinted at a man pushing himself and the boundaries of what was considered reasonable beyond comprehensible limits. Official records credit Major Charles Carpenter with destroying a total of 6 tanks, an impressive tally that notably included 2 formidable Tiger WW2 heavy tanks, along with several armored cars and trucks. However, unofficial accounts, including numerous claims by eyewitnesses, suggest the number of tanks destroyed or disabled might have been significantly higher, perhaps as many as 14. This discrepancy likely reflects the inherent difficulty of confirming kills in the chaotic, fluid situations of combat, especially when multiple weapon systems engaged the same targets. Each officially confirmed kill, however, represented an extraordinary alignment of circumstances. The weather had to be suitable for flying, but poor enough to keep German fighters grounded. Carpenter had to locate targets, approach them without being shot down, achieve accurate rocket hits on incredibly vulnerable areas, and then, miraculously, survive the return flight. The mathematical probability of consistent success was, frankly, minimal. Yet, he succeeded repeatedly. Consider the sheer technical audacity of it all. Hitting a 20-foot by 10-foot target, roughly the dimensions of a tank's top armor, while flying at 70 miles per hour from a distance of 100 yards, using unguided rockets fired from an unstable platform, all while under relentless enemy fire. Artillery observers who were privileged, or perhaps terrified, to witness Carpenter's attacks described them simply as impossible and insane. The two Tiger-I tanks that Carpenter destroyed represent particularly staggering achievements. Each Tiger cost an astronomical 250,000 Reichsmarks to produce and required specialized crews, trained for months. They were rightly considered nearly invulnerable to the vast majority of Allied weapons. Yet, these steel behemoths fell to rockets fired from an aircraft that cost the U.S. Army a mere $2,500 and required only basic pilot training to fly. The contrast in cost and the profound impact is startling. Carpenter's invaluable role extended beyond just tank hunting. As an observation pilot and General Wood's personal aviator, he provided crucial intelligence that profoundly shaped operational decisions. His unique ability to fly low and slow, combined with his inherently aggressive reconnaissance style, meant he often spotted German movements and concentrations before other intelligence sources could report them. His detailed, timely reports directly influenced several major decisions during the pivotal Lorraine campaign. When German forces attempted to mass for counterattacks, Carpenter's early warnings allowed American commanders to skillfully reposition reserves and artillery, preempting and blunting the enemy's thrusts. His detailed observations of German defensive positions were instrumental in planning successful attacks that achieved their objectives with minimal American casualties. The intelligence value of the L-4s was already well established, but Carpenter's aggressive tactics yielded an even richer trove of information. By forcing German units to react violently to his presence, shooting at him, dispersing their formations, frantically moving to cover, he inadvertently revealed their positions, their strengths, and their vulnerabilities that might otherwise have remained hidden. This intelligence work, while perhaps less dramatic and attention-grabbing than his spectacular tank hunting exploits, may very well have been his single most valuable contribution to the war effort. The precise, timely information he provided undoubtedly saved countless American lives and shortened engagements that might otherwise have devolved into prolonged, bloody battles of attrition. The extraordinary success of Carpenter's improvised weapon system highlighted a curious paradox of World War II technology. Germany, despite its formidable reputation for advanced, cutting-edge weaponry, possessed no true equivalent to the simple, yet remarkably effective, L-4 observation plane. The Wehrmacht relied on the Fieseler Fi 156 Storch for similar missions, but it was a larger, more complex, and significantly more expensive aircraft, produced in much smaller numbers. The American approach, exemplified by the L-4, was one of mass production of simple, reliable equipment, a philosophy that ultimately proved superior to Germany's emphasis on technological sophistication and over-engineering. The L-4 was, at its core, a civilian aircraft pressed into military service with minimal yet ingeniously effective modifications. Its very simplicity was its greatest strength, making it easy to fly, maintain, and repair with basic tools and materials, even in the unforgiving conditions of the battlefield. Germany's tank designers had created magnificent machines, optimized for the brutal calculus of tank versus tank combat. The Panther's long 75mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges where return fire was utterly ineffective. Its frontal armor was nearly impervious to Allied weapons. But this singular optimization for ground combat left critical vulnerabilities that simple American ingenuity, embodied by Carpenter, could exploit. The bazooka itself represented American pragmatism at its finest, developed quickly from a simple concept, mass-produced in staggering numbers. It empowered every infantry squad with potent anti-tank capability. When Carpenter, with a stroke of genius, mounted 6 of these infantry weapons on an observation plane, he created a weapon system that German doctrine had never anticipated and, critically, couldn't effectively counter. As 1944 bled into 1945, Carpenter continued flying combat missions, despite the ever-increasing German awareness of the rocket-armed Cubs. The Wehrmacht, in a desperate attempt to adapt, issued specific instructions for dealing with armed observation aircraft, including dedicating anti-aircraft weapons to tracking them whenever they appeared. In December 1944, during the harrowing Battle of the Bulge, Carpenter flew critical reconnaissance missions in truly terrible weather conditions that grounded most other aircraft. His invaluable reports on German movements helped American commanders respond decisively to the surprise offensive. Though he had fewer opportunities for tank hunting in the abysmal weather, his intelligence gathering proved utterly indispensable. January 1945 brought renewed offensive operations as American forces relentlessly pushed towards the Rhine. Carpenter, ever the innovator, continued modifying his tactics, experimenting with different attack angles and rocket combinations. He reportedly even considered adding more rockets, but was ultimately limited by the L-4's fragile weight capacity and the structural limits of the wing struts. His last confirmed tank kill came in February 1945, when he destroyed a Panzer IV attempting to defend a vital bridge crossing. Witnesses described him diving through a literal wall of tracer fire to deliver his rockets at point-blank range. The tank's destruction allowed American engineers to capture the bridge intact, critically accelerating the advance into Germany. Then, in March 1945, the war took a cruel personal toll on Carpenter. He began experiencing severe fatigue and other debilitating symptoms that forced him to drastically reduce his flying schedule. A medical examination revealed a devastating diagnosis: advanced Hodgkin's disease, a particularly aggressive cancer of the lymphatic system. Army doctors delivered a grim prognosis. He had, at most, 2 years to live. The diagnosis immediately ended his combat flying career. He was swiftly evacuated to the United States for treatment, leaving behind Rosie the Rocketer and the unparalleled reputation he had earned as one of the war's most unusual, yet undeniably effective, aces. His personal war was over, though the global conflict itself would rage on for 2 more months. The timing, perhaps, was a peculiar kind of fortune. As German forces became increasingly desperate in the war's final brutal months, anti-aircraft defenses became exponentially more deadly. Several L-4s attempting to emulate Carpenter's audacious tactics were tragically shot down in March and April 1945. The perilous window of opportunity for his unique, improvised form of warfare was rapidly, definitively closing. Charles Carpenter received an honorable discharge from the Army in 1946 and, defying all medical predictions, returned to his life's passion: teaching. Against the grim 2-year prognosis given by his doctors, he survived far longer. He resumed teaching history at Urbana High School in Illinois, and married life with Elna and their daughter Carol gently resumed. Remarkably, and perhaps poignantly, he rarely, if ever, spoke about his harrowing wartime experiences. His daughter later revealed that she knew little about his incredible combat record until after his death. This profound silence was a common trait among many combat veterans, a way of compartmentalizing, but it was particularly striking given the extraordinary, almost mythical nature of Carpenter's service. In the summers, he ran a boys' camp in the Ozarks, imparting outdoor skills and fostering character development. Former campers, interviewed decades later, remembered him as strict but fair, demanding yet supportive. None of them, not a single one, ever knew they were being taught by one of the war's most decorated and unusual tank hunters. His health gradually, relentlessly deteriorated through the 1950s and early 1960s, the Hodgkin's disease that doctors had predicted would kill him. In 1947 instead became a chronic, insidious condition he battled with quiet determination for 2 decades. He continued teaching until shortly before his death on March 22, 1966, at the relatively young age of 53. For decades after the war, the fate of Rosie the Rocketer remained shrouded in mystery. The aircraft had presumably been scrapped, like thousands of other war surplus L-4s, its immense historical significance tragically unrecognized. Then, in October 2017, a remarkable discovery sent ripples through the aviation history community. Serial number 43-30426 was unequivocally identified in the collection of the Austrian Aviation Museum in Bad Vöslau, Austria. How it arrived there remains unclear, a fascinating historical puzzle, but the aircraft was undeniably Carpenter's. Serial numbers and other specific markings confirmed its identity without a shadow of a doubt. Even more remarkably, the aircraft still retained tangible evidence of its storied combat service, including multiple professionally patched bullet holes, silent, eloquent witnesses to its perilous past. The Collings Foundation acquired the aircraft in 2019 and lovingly repatriated it to the United States. A meticulous, historically sensitive restoration followed, with historians and skilled technicians working tirelessly to return Rosie to her wartime configuration, preserving her battle scars for future generations. The bullet hole patches, those poignant reminders of harrowing close calls, were carefully preserved as invaluable historical evidence of the aircraft's incredible combat journey. The restoration process itself unveiled previously undocumented details about Carpenter's ingenious modifications. The original mounting points for the bazookas were still clearly visible on the wing struts, a tangible link to his audacious innovation. Analysis of the patches showed that bullets had struck from multiple angles, powerfully confirming contemporary accounts of his attacks through curtains of heavy ground fire. Some patches even overlapped, suggesting that the aircraft had been repaired, often under extreme duress, multiple times between missions, a testament to the dedication of his ground crew and the relentless pace of his operations. While Carpenter's bazooka-armed L-4 was never officially adopted as a standardized weapon system, its audacious concept profoundly influenced military thinking about organic Army aviation. The powerful idea that ground forces needed their own dedicated air support, not dependent on the often conflicting priorities of the Air Force, gained immense credibility through powerful examples like Carpenter's direct battlefield interventions. The Korean War saw limited, experimental deployments of armed light aircraft, though none achieved Carpenter's singular success. However, the true vindication of his pioneering concept arrived with the revolutionary development of attack helicopters in the 1960s. The iconic AH-1 Cobra, and later the formidable Apache helicopters, embodied the very same principle. Slow, low-altitude platforms delivering devastatingly precise direct fire support to ground forces. Modern military doctrine now widely recognizes the immense value of what Carpenter so brilliantly demonstrated, that air support doesn't always necessitate fast jets and heavy bombs. Sometimes, precise firepower delivered at close range by a platform that can loiter, observe, and react in real time is far more valuable than high-speed, fleeting attack runs. The improvised nature of Carpenter's weapon system also left an indelible mark on military thinking, regarding field modifications and soldier-driven innovation. The U.S. military, notoriously rigid in its protocols, became more receptive to bottom-up improvements, recognizing that combat troops, intimately familiar with the unique problems of the battlefield, often developed practical, ingenious solutions that engineers in their distant design labs hadn't anticipated. The lesson of Bazooka Charlie was unequivocally clear. Sometimes the best, most effective solutions emerge from those closest to the problem, not from the top down. In 2023, Carpenter's daughter, Carol Aki, co-authored Bazooka Charlie, the unbelievable story of Major Charles Carpenter and Rosie the Rocketer, with aviation writer James P. Busher. The book, meticulously researched and based on hundreds of preserved letters and photographs, finally revealed the complex man behind the legend. The letters painted a portrait of a complicated individual, brave but not reckless, aggressive yet thoughtful. His writing unveiled someone who deeply understood the moral complexities and inherent tragedies of war, while simultaneously maintaining an absolute, unwavering determination to fulfill his duty. He expressed pride in his extraordinary achievements, but also a profound sadness at the grim necessity of killing. One particularly poignant letter, written after destroying a Tiger tank, reflected on the shared humanity of his enemies. They were someone's sons, perhaps fathers, but they were trying to kill my friends, and I couldn't allow that. This emotional intelligence, combined with his tactical brilliance and raw courage, made him truly exceptional among warriors. Carol Aki described her father as fundamentally a peaceful man who had profoundly compartmentalized his war experiences. He had moved on emotionally, she said in interviews. I think he came back from the war shattered, and it was a hard time for my mother too, trying to start her life over again, waiting for 4 years for him to come home, thinking he never would. A bronze sculpture, a fitting tribute, was unveiled at Moline High School in 2023, commemorating Carpenter's service, depicting him standing proudly beside a representation of his L4. The dedication ceremony drew veterans, historians, and aviation enthusiasts from across the country. Former students from his teaching years, now elderly themselves, shared cherished memories of a dedicated educator who, with characteristic humility, never once mentioned his wartime heroics. The American Heritage Museum in Massachusetts, where the meticulously restored Rosie the Rocketer is proudly displayed, has created an extensive, immersive exhibit about Carpenter's service. Visitors can see the actual aircraft, complete with its preserved bullet holes, and delve into the incredible story of the man who, with sheer will and ingenuity, transformed an observation plane into a tank destroyer. The Experimental Aircraft Association regularly features Carpenter's story in its educational programs, utilizing his innovation as a powerful example of American ingenuity and determination. Young pilots learn not just about his tactical achievements, but about the profound kind of critical thinking that allows individuals to transform seemingly insurmountable limitations into decisive advantages. Military historians continue to rigorously study Carpenter's tactics and their profound impact on the Lorraine campaign. While his official tally of 6 confirmed tank kills might seem modest when compared to the thousands of tanks destroyed throughout World War II, the psychological and tactical impact of his actions far exceeded the raw numbers. Carpenter's success raises crucial questions about innovation, courage, and the very nature of warfare itself. How did a history teacher, a civilian by inclination, with no specialized combat training, become one of the war's most unusual and effective aces? The answer lies in a rare, almost unique combination of factors that, by chance or destiny, aligned perfectly. First, his privileged position as General Wood's personal pilot, afforded him an unusual degree of freedom to pursue his own audacious initiatives. Most L-4 pilots were rigidly restricted to specific reconnaissance patterns and schedules. Carpenter, however, could actively hunt targets of opportunity, choosing precisely when and where to strike, leveraging his unique situational awareness. Second, his background as a history teacher may have paradoxically contributed to his profound tactical thinking. History teachers innately understand patterns, cause and effect, the critical importance of timing, and the power of human agency. Carpenter applied these finely honed analytical skills to the crucible of combat, recognizing vulnerabilities and opportunities that others, perhaps more narrowly focused, might have entirely missed. Third, the specific conditions of the Lorraine campaign created fertile ground for his unique tactics. The relatively open terrain, the concentration of German armor, and the highly fluid nature of the battle meant that targets were available, provided one possessed the extraordinary bravery to engage them. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Carpenter possessed a truly rare combination of innate courage and a profound, almost philosophical fatalism that allowed him to repeatedly risk everything. His famous comment about attacking 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day revealed a man who had accepted the grim likelihood of death and, in doing so, resolved to make every moment count. The statistics of Carpenter's combat service, when meticulously examined, reveal the truly extraordinary nature of his achievement. 6 tanks officially confirmed destroyed, including 2 formidable Tiger farmer heavy tanks within that total. Multiple armored vehicles and trucks annihilated. 16 rockets fired in just 3 sorties on September 20th, 1944 alone. A single day of unparalleled destruction. Approximately 100 combat missions flown. 0 L-4 grasshoppers lost under his command, despite multiple, often devastating, bullet strikes. 1 pilot survived what should have been impossible odds. Each number represents dozens of split-second decisions, any one of which could have been fatal. The sheer fact that Carpenter survived his entire combat tour defied all probability. Contemporary pilots who dared to attempt similar tactics rarely survived more than a few missions, quickly succumbing to the overwhelming odds. The economic equation was equally remarkable, almost absurd in its efficiency. The total cost of Carpenter's L-4 and its modifications was less than $5,000. The Tiger tanks he destroyed cost over 250,000 Reichsmarks each to produce, and that figure doesn't even account for the months of specialized training for their crews, or the immense logistical effort required to transport them to the battlefield. In purely financial terms, Carpenter achieved one of the highest return on investment ratios of the entire war, turning a modest investment into devastating strategic impact. Despite extensive documentation and countless interviews, some aspects of Carpenter's incredible story remain shrouded in mystery, prompting deeper reflection. How did he manage to maintain such profound psychological stability to continue undertaking such relentlessly dangerous missions, day after day, week after week? What deeply ingrained drive propelled him to push far beyond the already hazardous job of observation flying into the terrifying realm of direct, point-blank combat? His preserved letters provide tantalizing clues, but no complete, definitive answers. He wrote about duty, about the profound imperative to protect his fellow soldiers, about his fervent desire for the war to end so he could return home to his family. But these motivations, while undeniably admirable and deeply human, don't fully explain the truly extraordinary, almost suicidal risks he consistently took. Perhaps the answer lies, in part, in his generational context. The men who fought World War II had, almost universally, survived the brutal crucible of the Great Depression, forging in them a profound understanding of hardship, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of survival. They had witnessed, with horror, the insidious rise of fascism and understood it as an existential threat to democracy, to civilization itself. For someone like Carpenter, who taught history and profoundly understood the stakes of the moment, half measures were simply unacceptable, an abrogation of duty. Or perhaps it was simpler still. In the unfathomable chaos of war, ordinary people are sometimes called upon to do extraordinary things, simply because circumstances demand it. Carpenter saw a clear problem. German tanks were killing Americans, and he, uniquely, found a solution, however improbable, however dangerous. That the solution required flying a delicate, fabric-covered plane into point-blank range of enemy guns was, for him, simply an acceptable risk, a necessary price. Carpenter's innovations influenced far more than just military tactics. His story rapidly became an integral part of the emerging mythology of American ingenuity. The powerful narrative that a clever individual, armed with basic tools and an indomitable spirit, could overcome sophisticated enemy technology through sheer determination and creative, outside-the-box thinking. This narrative resonated particularly strongly in post-war America, a nation seeking to understand and celebrate its hard-won victory over enemies that had seemed so formidable, so technologically advanced. Carpenter's David versus Goliath story provided a perfect, compelling metaphor. American practicality and individual initiative triumphing over German engineering and rigid military tradition. The story also profoundly influenced how the military itself began to think about innovation. Rather than dismissing unconventional ideas from junior officers or enlisted personnel as mere cowboy antics, commanders became more open to field expedients and soldier-driven improvements. The clear lesson of Bazooka Charlie was undeniable. Sometimes the most effective, most ingenious solutions spring directly from those closest to the problem, those facing the immediate, brutal realities of combat. For the aviation community, Carpenter's exploits spectacularly demonstrated the astonishing versatility of light aircraft. The humble Piper Cub, originally designed as a trainer and pleasure aircraft, had proven itself capable of fulfilling critical, combat-ready roles its designers never, in their wildest dreams, imagined. This newfound appreciation for versatility would profoundly influence post-war aircraft development, with designers increasingly considering multiple potential uses and adaptable roles for their creations. The story of Charles "Bazooka Charlie" Carpenter utterly defies conventional military narratives. A high school history teacher flying an unarmed observation plane simply should not have been able to destroy German heavy tanks. A fabric-covered aircraft with a mere 65 horsepower engine should not have survived repeated combat missions against direct ground fire. 6 bazookas crudely strapped to wing struts should not, by any stretch of the imagination, have constituted an effective weapon system. Yet every single one of these impossibilities happened between September 1944 and February 1945. Carpenter transformed the L-4 Grasshopper from a passive observation platform into an active, lethal combat system. His official tally of 6 tanks destroyed, including 2 fearsome Tiger I heavy tanks among that number, stands as one of the most improbable and inspiring achievements in the entire history of military aviation. The German forces at Aurore and throughout the Lorraine campaign learned, to their terror, to fear the faint, buzzing sound of small aircraft engines. What had been dismissed as harmless spotters became, for them, potential death from above. Tank crews who had felt a measure of relative safety from American fighter bombers, which rarely operated in poor weather or at dangerously low altitudes, now faced a terrifying, unpredictable threat they simply couldn't effectively counter. The profound transformation in German tactics From outright ignoring L4s to actively engaging them with everything they have, dramatically demonstrates the strategic impact of one pilot's audacious innovation. Carpenter forced the Wehrmacht to hastily adapt its anti-aircraft defenses, to dangerously disperse its armored formations, and to constantly, anxiously monitor the skies for slow-moving aircraft. These forced adjustments critically disrupted German operations and contributed significantly to American success in the pivotal Lorraine campaign. More than just a testament to military achievement, Carpenter's story represents the enduring triumph of human ingenuity over rigid, conventional thinking. Faced with the immediate, deadly problem of overwhelming German armor, he created an unprecedented, radically unconventional solution, using only available materials and his sheer, unadulterated determination. The bazookas were designed for infantry. The L4 was designed for observation. But combined by someone willing to risk everything, they became something neither designers nor military planners had ever dared to imagine. The restored Rosie the Rocketer, now proudly displayed with her preserved battle damage, stands as a powerful, silent testament to American innovation and individual courage. Each patched bullet hole represents a harrowing moment when probability screamed failure, when all logic dictated retreat. Yet, Charles Carpenter pressed his attack. The aircraft that, by all accounts, should have been destroyed multiple times, instead miraculously survived to tell its incredible story to future generations. Charles Carpenter passed away in 1966, having remarkably outlived his doctor's grim prognosis by 19 years. He spent those precious additional years teaching young Americans about history, perhaps hoping they would implicitly understand that ordinary people, when confronted by extraordinary circumstances, can achieve truly extraordinary things. His students remembered him as demanding but fair, a dedicated educator, never knowing they were being taught by someone who had fundamentally changed the nature of aerial warfare through sheer will, relentless innovation, and unshakable courage. The German tank crews who faced him in France would have been utterly stunned, perhaps even horrified, to learn that their most terrifying nemesis was a high school history teacher. They would have been equally amazed, and perhaps mortified, to discover that the weapon system that so terrorized them was nothing more than 6 infantry bazookas crudely strapped to a civilian aircraft. But perhaps, in the chilling reflection of hindsight, they would have understood the larger, profound truth. In war, ingenuity, raw courage, and an unyielding determination can overcome even the most seemingly impossible odds. The L4 grasshopper that hunted panthers and tigers across the fields of France proved, unequivocally, that David could still defeat Goliath, especially when David had 6 slingshots and the boundless courage to use them at point-blank range. In the end, that may be the single most important, most enduring lesson from Bazooka Charlie's war. That human ingenuity and raw, unadulterated courage can transform even the humblest, most unassuming tools into powerful weapons of victory, fundamentally reshaping the course of history one improbable flight at a time.